Okay. I think I'm coming off a very hotly debated topic around privacy uh, because of the fact that what I'm going to present is something which has consumers' videos being captured. Let me start by saying that we took enough care to kind of make sure that we got people to understand what this is going to be used for and what we are going to do with this. So starting on, I'm going to be talking about using mobile as a device to capture emotions of consumers. Uh, there are a couple of things that I want to take you through. The first one is the practicalities of using this device to be able to do what we are trying to do. So there are a lot of interesting things that happened to us when we were trying to use this instrument to capture emotions of consumers in field, face to face at their homes. The other thing that we were grappling with was whether we would get desired outcomes in terms of what we are looking for. So, is it just going to leave us with not so good information, or are we going to get something meaningful? Our biggest agenda over here was to look whether what we capture over here will add insights to already existing information that we have on those ads that we tested over here. So that's something that we were looking at. And finally, what could be the future possibilities from this technology being used in this way? Okay. What did we do? We did a pilot study in India. It was pretty large scale. We met up with 600 people across 2 different towns. What we used was a Nokia phone, to show 6 different ads to consumers. While they were being shown these ads, their faces were recorded, and those videos were then analyzed to look at what is the emotional payback, what is the emotional feedback that we are getting from these consumers when they are watching these ads. In terms of technology, just to briefly mention that we used Lumi's technology in terms of integrating the facial coding take up within the mobile. So that was an excellent use of technology. And of course, we used Effectiva for our facial coding analysis. So those were the 2 partners that we worked with in terms of capturing the data through mobile and then analyzing it using the facial coding analysis. Okay. There were 3 objectives. What was the feasibility of using mobile to capture emotions in field? So this is all outside in a market like India. What was the feasibility of obtaining sensible data using this technology? So yes, you can get some face videos, but was that making sense? And therefore, looking at the additional insights that we could get using this data on advertising that we showed these consumers. Okay. All right. We started with a whole host of issues, which, as you can imagine, interviewers who are doing this, for the first time, despite whatever training you do, they go out and you have various sort of issues. So we had issues around either over or under exposure of lighting, faces not coming properly, half faces, multiple people coming in to see the ads, and we had initial cases where we were very short in terms of getting proper responses. I'll just show you a small clip to just highlight this. Okay, so poor girl was kind of, trying to do something to her nose. So we got, these whole host of issues, and we were, when we got the sort of responses, we were wondering what to do with this, and should we put a clamp, or, what should we do? Some weird ideas came to our heads. What we managed to do, though, is we did some iterative training of interviewers. So that was the only way that this was going to work out in the field. And finally, we managed to get some good quality videos. Towards the end of the, as you can see, we managed to get some 92% hit rate, where most of the interviewers were able to do this properly. And we had some simple guidelines around where should the device be placed, so it can't be too near or too far. The camera angle, etc., we need to kind of make sure, and a minimum acceptable limit in terms of what proportion of the video is really usable for us. So we managed to get our way through, and finally we got these sort of folks. So the second objective which we had was whether we could get sensible data, and as you could see through some of those videos, people were giving enough expressions which were making sense. They were emoting when they were seeing those ads, and we could see a range of expressions coming through from folks who were interviewed. So that was the other thing which we were sort of grappling with. And we saw that that was working fine when we were able to get proper face videos. Okay. The third bit, which was the most interesting and challenging one, was to look at what does this really add to our already existing understanding of these ads from our pre-testing. And over here, I'll share some ads and some examples of analysis that we did to see that it really added a good layer of insights to what we got from our pre-testing on top of that. Okay. I'll just play this ad so that you have this context. This is ad for Sprite.
Yeah, अगर perfect नहीं है. Like I mean that, देखो.
गर्लफ्रेंड के सामने दूसरी लड़कियों को कैसे देखे? First drink, then think.
तुमने उस लड़की को देखा? वो कपड़े उसे बिल्कुल सूट नहीं करते।
कुछ लोगों को कपड़ों की समझ ही नहीं है।
और उस लड़की को देखो।
Remember, first drink, then think. Sprite, University of Freshology.
Yeah. So this is what we got. We got some good mentions initially. And we got good recall in terms of the scene in the middle where the water comes in and the guy is starting to look at drinking Sprite. But when we saw the responses from facial coding, we could see that the end scene where respondents get the fact that the joke has been played on the girl and the guy acted smart is where we got the maximum number of smiles. So that's something that we could temper with when we looked at facial coding, while in a pre-testing you got sort of equivalent responses on both those. The other thing that we figured out, and that was again helping our understanding of how the ad performed, was the whole concept of the professor coming in was something which was confusing to consumers, and that's something which also came out in terms of how they overall evaluated the ad in terms of what the message was coming through. And also those parts didn't really register too well with the consumers. So we could see some additional insights coming through when we looked at the analysis through facial coding. Again, in Hyderabad, we could see that the last scene where the reveal happens is where we could get maximum positive response at an emotional level. And again, over there, even more sharply, the professor's concept coming in, the phraseology thing coming in through the professor was something which was pretty confusing, and therefore we saw that people were really not able to understand what is happening over there, and that led to even worse off ratings on the ad in Hyderabad. Okay. Moving on, the second example which I have is of this Coke ad.
According to the law, shake it, baby, shake it, baby.
Yeah, so the Coke ad, again, the initial scene where the professor gets the Coke bottle and the reveal is there in terms of, there is this guy who's drinking Coke, that got good smiles and feedback from consumers. And also the last scene where the Sardar is shown, the Sikh is shown, that and the Parrot scene, both of them again got a very good bump back in. And this really was interesting because in North, the relatability with the Sikhs is obviously higher, and we will see in a minute what happens in Hyderabad over there. Again, a lot of the scenes in the middle where we could see that there were too many things happening at the same one after the other in quick succession. Not unlike the initial story which was building up where you had the professor scene, we saw there was increasing confusion out there. So we could pick up the reasons and the diagnostics why things were working the way they were in the ad test. Okay. Again, when we looked at aggregate measure of valence, which is a net of positive emotions, we could see that the last scene where the Parrot comes in, there is a resolving of any confusion that might have been happening prior to that, and also people are smiling a lot, and therefore you get a very positive sort of uplift over there. We saw that the branding for this ad was nice, and we felt that because the brand was right there when the peak moment was happening, it could have led to that sort of a uplift for the brand in this ad. So it was rightly placed where the ad was getting and generating maximum emotional response. Okay. In Hyderabad, again, we saw similar stuff. The teacher sequences where the ad peaks up in terms of emotional response, and then you again have the same thing happening in the end. The Sikh that didn't get so much of a response in Hyderabad. The Parrot got a much better response. Again, Hyderabad had a lot of confusion around the intermediate sequences when a lot of things were happening one after the other. So that was interesting, and we could see some of this also coming through, some of the story feedback, some of the likes that we could see in our pre-testing. I'll show you the final ad on 7up.
ओ गाड़ी रोक, मैं ड्राइवर का सर तोड़ दूंगा।
हाँ, तो ब्लैक बेल्ट टाइप है आप।
What a black?
अच्छा तो जिम में जाते हैं आप?
नहीं जाता।
तो मेडिकल इंश्योरेंस तो है ना?
नहीं है।
अच्छा तो डैडी पुलिस में होंगे?
नहीं है।
अरे तो फिर रिस्क क्यों ले रहा है यार? अपने गुस्से को गटक जा 7 अप के साथ। इसका रिफ्रेशिंग लेमन फ्लेवर आपके गुस्से को कर दे एकदम चिल।
मर्डर केस हो जाना था आज तो। 7 अप ने बचा लिया तेरे को। हाँ
7 अप गुस्सा हटाओ, चिल मचाओ।
Okay, so while the build-up in the beginning was, something which was all right, and people were just trying to, understand what is happening. Once the brand comes in, there is absolutely no understanding of why, what is the role of that in this entire sequence. So it was quite unclear to people, and it showed up in terms of their response emotionally, where they were, going completely kaput in terms of being confused about, that transition from the initial scene to what was the role of the brand, and what was it doing over there. So that was quite insightful out there in terms of getting additional information. We could also see that between the two markets, we had different points in time where people peaked in terms of their positive response. So Delhi was, much more when they finally got the entire thing when this guy, said no. While in Hyderabad, early on they could, get a positive response, and that was again a difference that we saw between the two markets, despite being similar in terms of responses from ad pre-testing at a broad level. So I think what happened with us across all these examples was we got very pinpointed direction in terms of where exactly do the emotions peak up. And while in our pre-testing we get a much more generalized sort of a response in terms of aggregate scenes. That I thought was the most important thing which we took out from this, in terms of the ability to be able to pinpoint exactly which moments in the ad are creating what sort of a reaction for people. Just a short recap. In terms of how we did this, we used Lumi's technology to show the ads and capture face videos on mobile. We used Effectiva's facial coding technology to aggregate these responses and create dashboards. And then we analyzed this with our link data to provide additional insights on top of what we had. Okay, finally, what are the possibilities that we see from here? So while this was a pilot which was done to try and understand whether, how we can make this work out operationally in the field, and, whether it will lead to additional insights. Our sense in terms of where it can go from here is to a place where you actually have respondents looking at ads remotely. So, without an interviewer, doing it face to face, and actually being able to capture emotions as they are seeing these ads on their mobile devices remotely. So that is some place where we can go with this. And also in terms of tracking studies, which could either be face to face or otherwise, we could look at capturing these emotions and looking at how do they move over a period of time, and how does that relate to some of the things like wear out of ads, longevity of communications, ability to drive other metrics, and what happens out there in terms of the relationships like those. So those were a couple of things that we thought could be done with this technology going forward. The first one is something that we are quite aggressively looking at in terms of markets where we have smartphones and the ability of consumers to actually capture this sort of information on their phone. The second one is a bit more of a long haul in terms of how we go about this and whether we should do it in PAPI or CAPI with sort of situations. So that's some of the possibilities from there. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much, Pankaj.
It's really great to see such groundbreaking technology being applied in a market like India as well, which is great. Do you have any questions from the floor? None at all.
Madhu from WhatsApp, India. Pankaj, just wanted to understand, the facial coding technology that you mentioned, is it an entirely automated process? Because, I mean, so for some of the subjective parameters like confusion and smiles, etc., is it an entirely automated process, or is there also a manual intervention? And had another question. So some of the issues that you mentioned relating to the kind of camera that needs to be there, wide-angle lenses, the distance, lighting, etc., do you ever see whether this is a solution that can be self-administered at some point in the future, given the challenges involved?
Okay, so the answer to your first question is that it is automated. So a machine actually is able to understand what is the expression that you have, and therefore what does that connote in terms of emotions. So that is something which is automated. Effectiva has that technology, and we are using them not just for mobile but for other regular work as well to be able to get that. The second question is the one where I think it will take time and some sort of understanding or education to consumers in terms of how to do it and make it idiot proof. For example, you could be putting a face in face within the phone when you are telling the consumers that this is the right time for you to kind of see the ad, or the ad will not be played before you actually get the lighting and the distance and the entire face coming into the camera. So those are the sort of things that we have already done in a non-mobile, in a CAVI environment, where again it is self-administered, and we are able to get a decent response rate in terms of getting the right kind of videos. So I think it's just a matter of time before it gets transferred to the mobile phone itself.
Hi, two questions. One, what was the key decision factor that you decided to convey this survey on a mobile device versus, let's say setting up an office and inviting people to take the video, watch the ad and be video captured there? That would eliminate the need for training. Also, you would make sure that you have their 100% attention. Is there anything else that made your decision to go and actually capture the video? Because there must be a reason to. And second question I had about the privacy. We were all talking about the privacy laws and stuff, and we all know it's not really well established in developing countries yet. But we as companies, we're trying to keep it safe. And for example, like even showing those facial videos here, do you think it was hurting the respondents' rights? Because or not? Because that's a very sensitive question. Because I'm sure you probably got their consent to use those videos in order to do the market research. But did they give you consent to share it with others for other purposes? So how do you deal with this kind of issues where you get a consent for one purpose, but you need to use it as another purpose? So two questions. Thank you.
So to answer your first question first, the reason why we tried to do this on a mobile at a face-to-face environment was twofold. One, we wanted to understand the feasibility of doing this with interviewers who are going out in the field and are able to carry this on a small device with them very easily versus a cumbersome laptop which could be used as a CAPI device to do the same thing. So that was one purpose in terms of operationalizing the thing. But the bigger purpose was really to see if this is going to finally, lead us to a place where it can be done as a self-filled format eventually. So that was the other thing that we wanted to test out. So those were the two things that we had in mind in terms of when we were trying to do this in an environment where we were letting interviewers do it in a face-to-face environment out there in the field. To answer your second question, we do have consent from respondents, not just to use it internally, but also to share it with other people in terms of showing their videos. So, for example, I will not leave these videos over here as a part of the conference takeout. So we clearly specify things like we will use it for research, we will show it to clients, but we will not leave those videos with anybody. So that sort of detailing is there, because all the time we use these videos to show clients how, as exemplars, how people are reacting to their ads at different points of time. So we do use them even in our regular work, not just on mobile. So that's the precaution that we take in terms of getting that consent.
All right. Yeah, I just have a question around kind of actionability, and maybe it ties into clients' acceptance of mobile results. The finding you had around the different the different perceptions in the different markets. Did Coke end up recutting the ad for different markets as a result of the the one city had the one response and the other city, did they end up recutting the ad?
Yeah, so the kind of outcomes from this is in terms of, so there are language edits, just to clarify, between the north and the south. So the sort of insights and the sort of takeouts from this could be cutting the ad in different markets differently based on what we are seeing over there. For example, the Sikh in the Coke ad, that was working well in the north, where you're okay. I mean, that's something that you see, but not so much in south. So that was something that one could hypothesize going in, but with these results, you could clearly see the difference coming through from the outcomes. So those are the sort of things that we recommend to clients in terms of actionability.
Very good. Any more questions at all from anybody? I've got one over here.
Thank you for presentation, very interesting one. Basically, you mentioned that the reaction to ads is tied to the cultural background, if you want to call the language and other things. How is the recognition of emotion is different depending on races and other things? Is there any difference there, or?
Good question. This is something that we have been dealing with in terms of trying to understand this at a much wider level, not just in India but across the world. What we have figured out, looking at thousands and thousands of videos and also a lot of literature in terms of the work done by Paul Ekman, Darwin before that, is that you get very similar expressions which mean the same emotions across multiple cultures. The only difference that happens is that in cultures like Asia, in parts of Asia, to some degree in China, Southeast Asia, but more so in markets like Japan, you have a much more muted sort of expressiveness, if you might, in terms of how people react. And therefore, we take that sort of thing into account. And also, one of the things that we realized when we worked with this in the actual real field setups, where you have a CLT venue and you have interviewers sitting with consumers, is that interviewer influence in terms of how people react, in terms of the degree of reaction that you give, is very heavy. So we make sure that operationally we move that person out of line of sight, and so that people are one-on-one with the stimulus that they are seeing. So those are the learnings that we have. But to answer your initial question, culturally there is no different meaning of a smile. So a smile means enjoyment and happiness across cultures. Yep.
Okay, very good. So before we go.